Hello and welcome back to the Argyle HR Technology Leadership Forum, Tech Transformation. My name is Michael with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. Now, to ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Laura Lee, Executive Coach and HR Consultant, retired CHRO with MGM Resorts. We're excited to have Laura and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled Transforming the Workplace, HR Tools and Technologies for Success. Laura, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Michael. And just a little bit more about me. I come to you with over 30 years of human resources experience, having worked in healthcare, executive recruitment, and most recently in hospitality. And as Michael said, right now I'm HR coach, consultant, and I sit on an advisory board with Striver organization. And I'd like to turn it over and have the panel introduce themselves, starting with Deborah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Laura and Michael. Excited to be here today. My name is Deborah Vasquez Bruno. I am the Senior Vice President of Human Resources at Nitto Danko Avisha. And I too have been in human resources for quite a long time, over 20 years, all facets of human resources. I usually joke saying I'm industry agnostic because I've served in a lot of different industries. I also serve on the board of a nonprofit organization that help at-risk youth. So thank you. Excited to be here.
Great. Katina?
Yeah, so good morning. So again, thanks, Laura, Michael. So Katina Lane-Fambi, I am the Human Resources Director for Renewal by Andersen, which is a division of Andersen Windows and Doors. I have been in human resources for 22 years now, and I too have a pretty diverse background like my distinguished HR colleagues on the panel today. I've worked in labor. I've had the opportunity to be a Black belt. I've worked in diversity and inclusion in a global more role. I've worked HR compliance. So I've done manufacturing. So I think I've touched on pretty much all of the facets of HR over my 22-year career. So super excited to be here and to just share as well as learn, right? I think these panel discussions give us the opportunity to share as well as learn, and just super excited, like I said, once again, to be with you all today.
Great. Thank you, Katina. I love that. Always be learning. That's what I always say. And you can see the great experience we have for everyone to learn from. I'm going to start off with our first question. I'm going to throw it to you, Deborah. From your experience, how have you seen HR tools and technologies evolve over the last few years? Please share any real world examples you may have experienced or seen.
Sure. So thank you. So first, I want to start off by sharing something that is certainly a personal and professional pet peeve of mine, and that is calling something HR analytics or HR tools. Laura's laughing because she knows what I'm going to say. So oftentimes in human resources, we're called to provide tools for the workforce and for the business, but they're not HR. What we do is we're a conduit to the business. Our job is to supply tools, technologies, resources, ideas to help the business exceed and succeed, achieve their business goals. So what we're going to talk about today are tools that can come out of human resources, but they're certainly not ours to own. The business owns them, management owns them, employees own them. So that aside, I just like to share that because I think it's really important for us to keep that in mind. All of you on the call today come from different parts of different organizations, different levels, different divisions, different experiences. Please know that you own things that we're talking about today. We hope to learn from you as well, as Katina said. So in terms of how technologies have evolved, clearly the workforce has evolved. Business demands have evolved. We can talk about the COVID pandemic and how that has changed some of our lives over the last several years. years. But mainly what's driven the tools and technologies for me as an HR professional has always been about the business. So nothing is a one size fits all in this space or anything related to human resources. So it's really about meeting your business where they are in their journey, meeting your employees where they are in their journey. So what may have worked at one organization isn't going to necessarily work for another organization. The example I use is Microsoft Teams. That has now been sort of a platform that has been catapulted to the forefront of technologies that we all use, except there are those of us who've been working in a global workforce for a really long time. And Microsoft Teams, I think it was WebEx before, there was always some version of a webinar because we were always communicating with colleagues in different parts of the world. So for some of us, those technologies weren't new, but we had to adapt and help other employees learn how to use the technology, learn how to adapt, learn to understand the biases that come with technologies. And what I mean by that is turn your camera on. Well, that doesn't always work for people, especially when we were in the pandemic, as an example. So when I say meet your employees where they are, I really mean meet them where they are. There are things, socioeconomic backgrounds, maybe family situations that preclude people from turning their cameras on. I'm just using a real life example because I think it's important. You can't just flip a switch. It's not that easy. And it's our jobs as managers, not just human resources, but as managers to really understand where employees might be as they're learning new technologies or adapting to new technologies.
Great.
Yeah,
Tina,
so,
you wanna add
yeah.
anything?
Absolutely. So Deborah, I like how you first started off by saying, this isn't an HR thing, because that's typically where people default, this is an HR process. This is a HR project. This is driven by HR. And I like the way you kind of frame that, because I too more so see it as we are a resource. We're there to support. We are a partner, but it's not just necessarily driven by us. So when I think about technology, I think about, so if we go back, thinking if I go back 22 years and how a lot of our processes were very manualized, very manual, right? And so now you think of a lot of the cloud-based systems and things that we have out there where we can house data, and then we can go to a lot of your different systems, whether it's like a PeopleSoft system or a Workday system or some of the other really fancy systems out there to pull data, to house data. And then for me, that in turn creates opportunities for our HR professionals to focus on more of the strategic business types of initiatives, as opposed to more of the administrative things that we were typically accustomed to and kind of known for as HR professionals. So I am married to a computer engineer. And so if I am not a proponent of technology, then I'll probably be getting divorced tomorrow, right? So, I would say that definitely, I think about being productive as well as efficient, right? Again, because when you go back to a lot of manual processes and just looking at how technology has evolved over time, it has allowed us to be more efficient and definitely more productive. Because I think early on in my HR career, I worked in manufacturing. And I remember in manufacturing, everything was about productivity. So I was not exempt from, being productive as the HR leader for the manufacturing site. So just super excited that, technology, I think, kind of started off slow, but now I think post-pandemic, people have been forced and companies have been forced to really kind of move with the cheese and move very quickly.
Agreed.
Yep.
And again, I love what Deborah said. We may even have HR teams of one, and you may not have the technology we're talking about. So I think even we all started probably with manual data and so forth. And it's so important for HR to lead with data, make the business own it. For example, time to hire. If the managers don't know the time to hire, and perhaps it's because they're taking 6 weeks to even schedule an interview, well, it's HR's fault. You can't hire fast enough. So that's why I think it's important. If you have the technology, use it. If you don't, manually do it and ensure the business owns and understands the data. So Katina, how do HR technologies positively transform the workplace and improve processes? I kind of gave a little bit of an answer, I guess, there.
Yeah. So I would say, so here at Renewal by Andersen, we have this document called Who We Are, and one of the things in the Who We Are document is around, we pride ourselves on a world-class customer experience. Well, I've kind of taken that whole motto and I've modified it a bit to say, hey, I am priding myself as an HR director for Renewal by Andersen on a world-class employee experience. So when I think about technology and the transformation of technology and how it can be used in actually kind of cultivating and building out that experience, I think about, the first impression. So when you go to, technology allows you to go to sites and look at reviews on how companies show up from an employee perspective. So that's the big thing for me as far as, how do we leverage technology as far as building our brand, or when prospective applicants are looking at, us as a company, what are people saying? What is out there in the social media space? What's out there on your LinkedIn's of the world and things like that. And then we take it a step further. So once we recruit and we actually get them on board, then, a lot of our systems are now very digitized, right? And so but what does that look like, right? As far as, whether it's when they come on board, whether it's the onboarding training, whether it's the compliance courses that they have to complete, but are they still feeling like that to them that they're receiving this world-class employee experience? And then I just think about the technologies and the softwares and things that we have internally. Do employees feel like they can adapt to those tools and those technologies quickly? Or do they feel like it's something that's more of a strain and more of a heavy lift, which can ultimately be very discouraging to them? And so, this one was a really good question for me, because when I think about that pre-onboarding to the onboarding, the post-onboarding experience, how are we really leveraging the technologies to ensure that our employees actually do have that world-class employee experience? Because I think as a business, we do focus a lot on the technologies and the platforms from the customer standpoint. But again, for us, I'm kind of pushing and pushing the needle and pushing the envelope to say, from a digital transformation standpoint, what does that look like from an employee experience?
Yeah, those are all really great points, and I think the thing that hits hard on that one is when we talk about customers. When we're in human resources, you are our customers, employees are our customers. I say that all the time. So when you want to treat your customers a certain way, we're there to remind the business, to remind managers, to remind our customers that our employees are our customers. And your point about first impressions are incredibly important. So it's everything from brand recognition, to your point, social media posts, your website. It's things that may have been forgotten or taken advantage or discarded because you forget that that is part of the employee experience. It's from the minute they learn about us to hopefully their career with us. So that piece is really important to focus on their experience and their impression of the organization. So, and again, Laura mentioned this, not everyone has the bankroll, if you will, to have these bells and whistles or Workday, the most sophisticated, exciting talent management, people management software program. Doesn't matter. Even the smallest organizations can do right by their employees. Again, meet them where they are in their journey. Think about where you are in your journey. Try to be creative, innovative, utilize what tools you have at your disposal. It doesn't have to be the big bells and whistles.
Yeah, Deborah, and I would say, just kind of piggybacking off of that, and Laura, when you mentioned, some of your smaller organizations, I say we can take that as an opportunity to lead more inclusively, right? So if you are in a smaller organization, how do you leverage the skill sets, and specifically those that may have the digital intelligence, if you will, to really kind of help move the organization forward? So you can see, some people may see small organizations may not have the most sophisticated platforms and software systems and things like that, but the people are out there, the talent is out there. And so I could see that potentially as a way to, add value and really build that more inclusive workforce that we all drive to do as organizations.
Oh, that's great. We received one question, I think, that's kind of tied to the conversation. It's how do you promote the investment of the use of technology? And it sounds like you both have some great experience of whoever would like to share or both share.
Latina, do you want to go first? You want me to go first? Okay.
Yeah, you can
So
go first. I've kind of bogged
okay.
up most of the
No,
conversation
no, no.
anyway, so you
It's
go
okay.
ahead.
I didn't want your husband to be chirping in your ear saying, we got to say this. So I think what's important is, again, going back to the data. The data will tell a story. And as one of my colleagues used to say, to what end? So what? What is the data trying to tell you? So it's important for you to use data to talk about why the technology is important. What is it that you're trying to support? Why do you think this is important for the business? Remember, this isn't about HR. This is about in support of the business needs. So if you can build your business case using data to support why the technology is important, you'll have a better opportunity for success. But again, what is the business case? And use it from your perspective where you are. Don't try to be an Apple or a Yahoo or a Microsoft. I'm so tired of people using those as the sort of threshold to compare. We're not Apple or Yahoo, or maybe you are, but for those of us who are not. So make sure you're using data that's comparable to where you are, the size, net revenue, where you are in your industry, what do other companies do, right? If you think about what Latina said, business leaders listen to competitive market landscape. They want to understand what the competition is doing from a business perspective. Do the same thing from an HR perspective. What are your competitors doing? And I think that will also help.
Yeah, and I would just add, so I think Deborah, you hit on a lot of positive and critical points. And the one thing I would just add, when we talk about the business case, I think sometimes we can go so business heavy on the why and not incorporating the advantages or the benefits for the employee, right? And so I think that is always a critical piece. We want to make sure that while we're capturing a lot of the business analytics and the business case for the why, that we're also building in some of that around how this will benefit the employees as well. Because again, when you think about the book, Moving with My Cheese, Who Moved My Cheese, it's like part of it talks about what's in it for me. Why should I embrace change, right? So I think it's important that while we're laying out this fancy, sophisticated business case for the why and all of the numbers and the Gantt charts and the pivot tables and all of that wonderful stuff, let's not lose sight of what are the benefits for why we're moving in this direction as it relates to the people.
Great points.
Great. So Deborah, what role does technology play in regard to managing a distributed workforce, especially for employees who are fully remote? And maybe elaborate on some best practices you've used or seen.
Sure. So we actually talked about this a little bit, and we joked that we could probably have a whole separate session just on this question alone. And I think, again, the most important thing to remember is there are a lot of organizations who have had some pieces of their workforce who have been remote. So you take sales as an organization. Typically, sales employees have not been on site. They are off visiting customers and they are remote. So when you think about technology and how it's evolved in a remote workplace, you really need to think about, again, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? What is it that you're trying to answer? What are you trying to promote in your organization? And so in many ways, we get caught up in, well, we're remote now. And we have forgotten that perhaps some of us have been remote for many, many, many years. So you really have to think about this. This comes into question when we talk about productivity, right? And I'm just going to hit it on the head. There have been many organizations that have started to bring their employees back, either 3 days a week, 2 days a week, and some have actually gone all the way to 5 days a week. And the concept around that is you are more productive if you're sitting in the office. And there are lots of schools of thought on whether or not that is true. And there are many, many, many industries and organizations trying to articulate and really come up with KPIs around productivity. Well, how do I prove that someone is more productive while in the office versus proving that they are not productive when they're at home? And that comes back to, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Do you fundamentally believe that your employees are not productive when they're at home? Do you fundamentally believe you are less profitable because your employees are at home? And I'm saying this with suspicion on purpose, because typically what I have seen is organizations that become less profitable, or they're starting to see a decrease in profit or revenue, start to panic and say, oh my gosh, it's because people are at home. What I have learned in my experience, again, working with global workforces for many, many, many years, is the work ethic that you have in the office is the same work ethic that you will have when you are sitting at home. What I mean by that is, if I am a workhorse, I'm not suggesting everyone is, but if I'm a workhorse and I show up half an hour before my shift and I stay late, but I'm productive the entire time, meaning I'm on email, I'm in meetings, I am answering questions, my productivity is at a high, and you can prove that. You have KPIs, my goals are met, my objectives are met, I'm crushing it. I'm going to bring that home with me because that's who I am as a person. Where I do the work does not matter to me, the person who is a workforce. Also, you could have a person who's in the office that stops at the water cooler, at the coffee talk. You know this person, I'm sure you all have them. They're the person who stands in your doorway and will just talk your ear off. Even if you start typing on your keyboard and like you're trying to hint, that person will still stand there. They're going to be productive, or that kind of productive, whether they're standing in the office or at home. You have no idea if I'm sitting answering emails or if I'm searching Amazon. No offense to Amazon or Zappos, since I'm a shoe person. So when you're thinking about how to create KPIs around productivity, make sure that you're asking the right questions. Again, in support of what? What is the story I am trying to tell? What is the root cause? Why am I looking at this? And I mean, I, as the assuming you are the HR person who's been asked to come up with these KPIs. What I would also say to you is, work with your managers and ask the question, are they productive? Are they meeting their goals and objectives? What proof, evidence do you have that they're not productive? Same kinds of questions you would ask if we were all sitting in the office and all of a sudden a manager is complaining that they have someone that they need to put on a performance improvement plan because they're not productive. Use that same analogy, that same methodology that you would use in that situation as you would if someone was working remote. In my experience over the last 3 years, have not seen any kind of technology or data that has come out to show productivity means X unless you're in sales. That's pretty easy. Customer service, if you have certain number of calls you have to answer. Again, that's calls you have to answer, not where you answer them from. So this is a culture issue. This is a leadership issue. This is not an HR technology issue. I would argue, this isn't even an HR issue. This is truly about what leadership, and I mean big L, what leadership is trying to accomplish by either bringing people back or allowing flexibility. And there's a whole host of, like I said, philosophies and arguments on both sides of the equation. But that's just from my experience in the small part of the world that I have lived in for a long time.
Yeah, and I think you need to ask the big L leadership why. Why do you think there isn't productivity? And sometimes, and I shared with Katina and Deborah Friday, I had a situation where we put everyone remote. They were in the office. We found out we had broken processes, manual and system. So we brought everyone back into the office for 90 days, fixed everything because we wanted their input, and then put them back out to kind of a hybrid work schedule because we felt that worked best, for that one area in human resources. And Katina, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else.
Yeah, so I would just, add to, so Deborah, if I didn't know any better, I would swear you were listening on some of my conversations when it comes to that was a constant battle in my former life, and having to touch on a little bit of that in in my current work organization. But, I was very big on getting leaders to change their thinking. And I think, the pandemic really forced us, whether we chose to or not. It's like, look, you're either going to move with the cheese or you're going to get left behind. And so I would always challenge them when we talk about remote versus in the office, or more of what we consider that, what do you call that, distributed type of workforce, if you will. I said, we're focusing on the wrong things when we should be focusing on what's being done, to your point, Deborah, versus where it's being done. And they were kind of stuck in that whole mode of, they got to be in the office in order to be productive. And actually, some of the studies that I saw, Deborah, and some of the internal kind of studies that was done formally when I was at 3M, we saw that remote employees were more productive versus the ones who were on site. Because to your point, I could go to a meeting and, for 3M was this huge campus and it had buildings that were connected. And I could remember some days going from one building to another building to another building, and you'd have to pass the same intersection. And you would see that same person sitting there with a latte or cappuccino and their phone, definitely, obviously not doing work. But we were focusing more on the fact that, they came in at 8 o'clock in the morning and they clocked out at 6 p.m. But for me, it's about productivity. What was actually being accomplished during that time frame? Whereas someone who's working remote, if your first meeting is at 8 o'clock and you would normally have to commute into the office, you may be getting up around 6 a.m. to get started. So you're already in that mindset. So you're really starting to work at 6 a.m. And when we found that, you didn't shorten your work day, it was pretty much the same. So we kind of saw some of the opposite. And so it was just an uphill battle, a daily kind of conversation on getting leaders to think differently around, what's being done versus where it's being done.
Okay, and I think this is important for HR, where you need to have change management and really tap into some of those learning and development skills. Change management, a lot of this is generational understanding. If you look at it, I don't know the average age of most CEOs, but I'm going to assume a lot of them are probably baby boomers or older Gen X. So they don't always understand the technology. So it's educating them what the younger generations want and why. I shared with them a story where we were looking at a manager position. And it's like, well, it has to be, on the casino in the hotel. And one professional or leader was like, I've never once walked into their office. I'll walk into their boss's office, but I'm going to call this manager. So I don't care where they sit, but I need the body, right? They don't want to move here. So I think it's that education. And then from a leadership perspective, I think it's, we're probably seeing a gap sometimes with some of our business leaders of having that situational leadership understanding, to be flexible, understand, and really gauge, does this role need to be here? Does this role not need to be here? And that's where you need to maybe tap in either into your L&D skills, or if you have a team, tap into that group to see how you can maybe better educate and train your leaders. Because there'd be nothing worse than pulling everyone back in the office, and I've seen it happen, and everyone sits in an office on Zoom for 8 hours. Like, you can see the person sitting over there.
Yes.
I mean, how motivating is that? Like, I want to catch a kid's soccer game, and now I'm going to be late because it's a 45-minute commute instead of a 10-minute, drive from my house to the soccer field. So.
Yeah, and Laura, I kind of, if I could piggyback off of that, I kind of like what you said. So when I think about competitive advantage, right? You hear that a lot, and how do we as an organization remain competitive? It used to be the compensation, and before that, it was the benefits, right? And, if you worked at Chick-fil-A, you got a free meal, all those things. Those were all fun. They were McDonald's, right? Those were all some of these things. But, I like what you said about educating our leaders, letting them know what's going on, out in the market, letting them know what our competitors are doing to attract talent. Because I'll use myself as a perfect example. Prior to coming to RBA, I'd spent 12 years at 3M in various roles, and my most recent role prior to joining Renewal by Andersen, it was 100% remote because I was in a global role. My clients sat in Shanghai and Latin America and other parts of the world. So when they contacted me about this opportunity, they said, oh yeah, we're looking for someone to be on site. And I said, no disrespect, but I'm not your candidate, right? Because I'm like, I'm in a 100% global, remote role supporting a global organization. And then also, I wanted to weigh in about the importance of finding that balance, because I had, family and personal commitments that I was also had kind of established being in this remote environment. And then the second thing I would say is around, we can cast a wider net as it relates to getting that more diverse pool of candidates if we are flexible in our approach as far as, does someone literally need to be on site, to be effective? And when you don't have to relocate someone, there's a cost savings. Definitely you're going to get that quality candidate that, you don't have to relocate. And then the list just goes on and on. So totally love it when you say you got to educate. And I think education is just like learning. It's ongoing, right?
Yeah, you got to go where the talent is. I'm sure your TA teams will tell you we don't have this talent in the city within which we
Right.
sit. We need to go somewhere else, and people may not want to move where your business is.
Right. Laura, can I add a piece to what you were just saying about the
Of course.
generations? Because we actually haven't touched on that yet. And I think that's a really key point around technology in general. So not necessarily relating to the remote workforce conversation that we were just having, but when you think about the kinds of technologies that you want to roll out, it's not just about understanding where your organization is in terms of their maturity and their growth and their revenue and sort of what your budget is, but it's also important to understand your employee population and the demographics. So what Laura brought up when she was talking about remote workforce is really important regarding the generational differences. So we all know that the generation that's coming up into the workforce and has just started into the workforce are very much about their smartphones, right? And so they are also a very open organization because everything about their lives is on social media. They have instant gratification. Everything is at their fingertips. So when you're thinking about technologies, whether they're time cards, ADPs and the likes, or whether they're people management, how do I download my schedule, or how do I access my manager, you need to think about the kinds of technologies that resonate with your workforce. Again, doesn't apply for everybody, but we're seeing such a disparity among you now have 5 generations, I believe I read the other day, in the workforce. We are challenged to think about, well, how do we capitalize on that? How do we relate to the baby boomers, and how do we relate to the new generations coming in? That has created an interesting challenge for us when we think about technology. So that's something I would just ask you to consider when you're thinking about your different avenues of whatever kind of technologies that you want to put out and how you want to reach your workforce. That's really something to understand. What kind of demographics do you have?
And that kind of answers one question we'll dive into a little bit. And you have to look at the size of these generations, right? I just pulled this, I can't remember the site. Boomers are 21% of the population. They're starting to retire. Gen X is the smallest, 19%. Millennials are now the largest, 22%. And then Gen Z is another small population because most of the Gen Xers have the Gen Zers, right? So fewer and fewer people in the workforce. And that's why you have to understand the technology and that being flexible to going where they are.
Hey, Laura, you got really quiet right there. I heard you, but you got really quiet. I don't know if your microphone turned down.
It may have.
Katina, can you still hear her? Or is it faint?
Yeah, it's very faint.
Technology. Speaking
Oh,
of,
now you're back.
Better
there we
now. Better
go.
now.
Technology.
You're back. You're good.
It is a blessing and a curse.
Speaking of technology, it keeps us on our toes, does it not?
It does. You have to be agile.
I know.
And have a sense of humor.
And then I think we talked a little bit about harnessing the power. So I'm going to go over, and I don't know who should be next. I lost track. So
I think it's Katina.
Katina, how is HR remodeling their technology infrastructures to incorporate new digital transformation for long-term success? I think you talked a little bit about it with the employee experience, but anything else you maybe want to add?
Yeah, so when I think about just, for those who have been in HR for some time, going back to a lot of our manual processes, well, whether it was, files or applications, and now we've moved away from the manual to more of a digital type of platform. So I would say that was one thing. Think about how we used to store files in filing cabinets and have index cards and all of those things. And
Used
now,
to? Careful,
Well,
some of us still do.
Yeah, we have technology, we still have files.
well, I think we have a lot of digital solutions out there right now that has kind of helped us to evolve. And when you think about remote work and digital solutions, I mean, I think the pandemic kind of, if we weren't already doing that, Deborah, I think the pandemic taught us that, hey, we better start digitizing a lot of things and automating a lot of things, especially if we're going to reach the mass of people when we're talking about being in this remote workforce, if you will. Some other things as I was looking, I read a couple articles because I think one of the questions was around artificial intelligence. And so it was talking about how a lot of the different softwares and technologies now kind of helps us to pre-screen, pre-employment candidates, or, even some of the other HR softwares help us with how do we score candidates when they interview, or, just the screenings through the Q&A process, the video interviews, the checking of social media platforms and other things like that. So I just kind of see it as, these are things in which we're going to have to do to remain competitive. And so as far as I'm concerned, people say the future, we talk about the future, but for me, the future is now. And so in order for us to really lean in and have that competitive advantage as an organization or as organizations, we have to continue to, one, leverage technology. I like what Deborah and Laura, the things you all said about making sure that as we are leveraging those technologies, being mindful of the makeup of the demographics of our employee workforce. So whether it's for some who may be more of your millennials or some of your, Gen Y, Z, I mean, just like the whole alphabet, right? And so, but it's just, how do they learn versus how your boomers learn things, and not just for the employees as a whole, but, scaling that down to when we think about when we're recruiting HR professionals for our organizations, especially those that have been in HR for some time, they used to do a lot of things manually, right? That used to be, in the space of where when they did candidate pre-screens, they were physically picking up the phone and pre-screening people, as opposed to now we have a lot of automation, different softwares that can do those things for us.
Right, absolutely. All right, so just we have a few questions and we're almost out of time. And so I want to honor the person who asked the first question, right? Because they were the bravest. So human resources, and they have resources in quotes. I think this has been lost. How do we show employees that we are there as a resource, not just the bad guy? So a little off technology, but I think a good question.
Great question. If you don't mind, I'll jump in on this one. Because when I saw it come in, I thought, oof, I feel so strongly about this. So part of it is establishing a relationship with your leaders and your employees. Remember, our job in HR is to be objective. We do not represent anyone. We are Switzerland, if you will. Our job is to promote and protect the best interest of the company, the managers, the employees. It's all the same, right? And so all of this is built on a foundation of trust. You need to be authentic in who you are as an HR leader. And the way to do this and show this is through experience. So when you're having conversations with employee, when you're keeping confidences, the ones that we can, I'm going to do the whole disclaimer, you know what you can keep confident, you know what you can't. But it's truly being an authentic leader, period, full stop, no matter what department you're in, quite frankly. But it's showing other ways that HR can be leveraged. Often we're used as the tool for performance improvement plans, or when there's an employee relations issue, blah, blah, blah. You need to get out there to show what else we do, which is the employee experience, like Katina was talking about. It's those fun events. And I'm not saying be hokey again, you need to be authentic and it's not a one size fits all. So ask yourself, if you're perceived as the bad guy, why? What is it about the culture that's making it feel like HR is the bad guy? Adopt leaders to be your evangelists, your advocates, your influencers. Build relationships with those people who can go out and help spread the news about why HR is a tool for the organization, not a bad guy. There is so much that we do. And for all of the HR people on the phone, thank you. I know how hard and how lonely this work can be, especially as someone who is in HR and has been. I know how hard it's been over the last 2.5 years. So thank you for all the work that you're doing on behalf of plenty of employees. I know there's a lot of good. There's also a lot of bad, but I know there's a lot of good. So just try to get out there, be vulnerable, have conversations, be real. That's what people want to see. They want to relate to you.
Yeah, so Laura, to make you feel a little better, I'll bring some of the technology into my answer. How about that?
All right, sounds good.
So I love everything that Deborah said. And yes, I think about, me as a human resources professional, the H in HR is the human aspect, like Deborah was saying, but I would even take it a step further and say, sometimes we need to go back to the basics. So, and what I mean by that, before technology, you call this number and you press 2 if you want to talk to someone, you press 3 if it's automated, you go over here if you want to file an FML. It's become so automated, if you will, and so less human, right? So sometimes when people just come with questions, if it's something that you can answer in that second or in that moment, just tell them. As opposed to saying, oh, you got to call the HR service center for that. Oh, you got to call the employee service center for that. Oh, wait a minute, you got to call this number for that. And so while that may be more efficient from a time perspective, what about the quality of the employee experience? So they're like, I'm not going to go to Katina anymore because she's just going to give me 4 or 5 different cards of 4 or 5 different people to call. And then after I've gone through all 5 of those, I still don't have the answer. So I think sometimes, we need to go back to the basics when we didn't have all of the automation and all of the large call centers that can handle the high volume of HR related types of questions and things like that. And I think just taking that time, people will appreciate that and say, hey, that HR person takes time. I mean, I deal with it all the time because my office sits on HR row. Even though I don't support the manufacturing organization, they don't know that, right? They just see Katina Lane Fomby, Human Resources Director, and they're looking for someone in HR. So I just take a minute, triage it, may not always know the answer, but at least letting them know that I see you, I hear you, and that, you are just as important as, anything else that I may or may not have been doing.
And we may not get to all the questions. I think I'm going to start an intervention program for HR professionals. It's just say no.
Yeah.
We like people, we want to help. Don't allow a mediocre leader who's afraid to fire someone, afraid to have that hard conversation. This is in my years and years of seeing this. This is how it starts. Well, you go do it, right? So then that's how HR becomes the bad guy. No.
Good point.
Right. I'll sit in with you the first time while you fire them and then coach you afterwards, but then you're going to do it on the own because I need to work on the strategic things. So I think that's very hard for HR professionals. And really just something we have to learn is to say no, because then we don't get to do the fun strategic things, build the employee experience, whatever it may be. And we have 1 quick minute. So Katina or Deborah or both, any kind of final thoughts before we end this session that you'd like to share?
I would just say that, look, as the workforce evolves, so does our business, so does our industry, so do we as human beings. And as Katina said very early on, be open to learning. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. You don't have to have all the answers. And just because Apple's doing it doesn't mean you have to do it. And reach out. I'm available if you ever have to ask a question or don't know who to ask. I'm always available. And thank you both. This has been great.
Katina?
Yeah, and so I would just say again, just super excited. I've learned so much just over the last 40 minutes or so. Some things that I'll take back, some things as an HR professional, I'll kind of think about and say, hey, can I do more of this? Can I do less of this? Again, always learning when it comes to transformation, because we realize that as an organization that, artificial intelligence and all these other, digital platforms is where we are, not where we're headed. It's where we are. And so in order to, like I say, stay ahead of the curve, continue to leverage that competitive advantage, whatever that looks like, whether it's from the business aspect, the people aspect, whatever it is, I think we do have to be open to moving with the cheese, but understanding that, making sure that we're not moving so fast that we're leaving people like in the wind, right? And so I think that that's the other part of it too. And that's where we come in as HR professionals to help our leaders kind of say, hey, pump your brakes a little bit. I know we're going to get there, but we want to make sure that everyone is coming along with us on this journey and not leaving some of the important, critical people behind, right? So again, I too am a resource. I am on LinkedIn. I'm happy to put my LinkedIn, my link in chat, but just super excited that I have now even some more HR professionals to add to my network and to balance a lot of things out. Because Deborah, I am with you. If I don't know half of the things, and even we just said, even the things that may have been cutting edge 22 years ago, they are historic. Even some
as
of the
my
things we
kids
learned
remind
last
me.
year. Yes, they do remind us. They are historic. They are, what it called dinosaurs now, right? So
Yes.
just always being open to your point, to learning. So thank you all again so much for your time, and just, super excited about being a part of the panel.
And I apologize, there's a lot of great questions. So those of you we couldn't get to the questions, and I think I'm turning it back over to Michael.
Thank you, Laura, Katina, and Deborah. This was a wonderful, insightful panel discussion. Thank you all. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today for this fantastic session. Now, this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Thank you, everyone.